Ethan had crossed 12 hyperspace lanes, survived a shuttle pilot who claimed braking was an optional tradition, and accidentally eaten something that politely introduced itself before becoming dinner. By the time he reached Lysura, he decided the galaxy was either wonderfully welcoming or completely insane. The Starfire Festival certainly supported the second theory. Floating islands drifted through a violet sky where 3 moons shimmered behind transparent rings of crystal dust. Rivers of glowing energy curved through the streets instead of water, carrying tiny luminous creatures that looked suspiciously like fish wearing spectacles. Every few seconds, another burst of color blossomed overhead as harmless plasma flowers bloomed and vanished, their petals dissolving into thousands of glittering lights. Thousands of visitors from dozens of civilizations filled the avenues. Some walked on 4 legs, some floated inside anti-gravity bubbles, and one species appeared to communicate entirely through synchronized sneezing. Ethan watched them for a moment before muttering, "I should have packed a bigger notebook." His translation wristband beeped. "Correction," it announced. "You should have packed common sense." He looked down at the device. "I don't remember buying a sarcastic translator. Premium package," the bracelet replied proudly. "Sarcasm improves user satisfaction by 3%. Who approved that? No surviving records." Ethan sighed. "I believe that." Music suddenly swept across the city. It wasn't played through speakers, but carried by tiny drones shaped like silver birds. Their wings produced melodies instead of sound waves, and every note painted shimmering patterns across the air. Couples began dancing beneath floating lanterns that changed color according to nearby heartbeats. Children chased miniature comets that bounced harmlessly between buildings, while robotic vendors sold everything from edible starlight to gravity-flavored ice cream. Ethan bought the ice cream. It immediately floated away. He spent nearly 5 minutes chasing his dessert through the crowd, while several nearby aliens applauded his determination. "You caught it," one elderly merchant cheered. "I paid 12 credits," Ethan answered, finally grabbing the floating scoop. Failure wasn't an option. He took one bite. It tasted like cold cinnamon mixed with electricity. "Honestly," he admitted, "that's better than I expected." As laughter echoed around him, another melody drifted through the square, slower this time, elegant enough that conversations naturally faded. The dancers seemed to move as one beneath the glowing sky. Then Ethan noticed her. She stood near the center of the plaza, as though she had quietly appeared between one heartbeat and the next. She looked almost human. Almost. Her ears were long and graceful, extending delicately through strands of silver blonde hair that shimmered beneath the festival lights. Her face carried a calm confidence, her blue eyes reflecting entire constellations, as if the stars themselves had chosen to rest there for the evening. She wore simple traveling clothes rather than jewelry or royal ornaments, yet somehow everyone nearby seemed to leave her just enough space without realizing they were doing it. She looked toward Ethan. He quickly looked away. His translator buzzed. "Congratulations," it whispered. "You have forgotten how eye contact works." "I have not." "You absolutely have." Before Ethan could argue, a soft voice interrupted him. "If you're planning to challenge the floating ice cream again," the woman said with an amused smile, "I should warn you, it usually wins." Ethan glanced at the half-melted dessert in his hand. "I'd call this a draw." She laughed, warm and genuine, the kind of laugh that made the enormous galaxy suddenly feel much smaller. "And what?" she asked, extending her hand toward him as another dance began beneath the glowing stars. "Does a human do after defeating such a formidable dessert?" Ethan smiled. "I suppose," he said, taking her hand, "he accepts the next impossible challenge." The woman led Ethan into the growing crowd just as the music shifted once more. Tiny silver drones circled overhead, projecting ribbons of light that wrapped around every dancer like living constellations. Instead of a traditional dance floor, the plaza itself responded to movement. Every graceful step created ripples of glowing symbols beneath their feet, while clumsy mistakes produced harmless bursts of sparkling confetti. Ethan looked down after taking his first step. A cloud of bright orange feathers exploded around his boots. The woman covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. "I suppose," Ethan sighed, "the floor is an honest critic. It only celebrates exceptional dancers. And what does it do for beginners?" She pointed toward the feathers still drifting around him. "Public humiliation." Her laughter escaped this time. Warm enough to make Ethan laugh as well. I appreciate your honesty. I've discovered honesty is much funnier than diplomacy. That sounds like someone who has never attended a family reunion. She tilted her head. Are human family reunions dangerous? My aunt once started an argument over potato salad that lasted 9 years. The woman blinked. 9 years? The potato salad survived fewer. She laughed so suddenly that several nearby dancers turned to look, smiling simply because someone else was enjoying themselves. The music accelerated. Without warning, gravity softened across the plaza. Hundreds of dancers rose several centimeters into the air, gliding instead of walking. Children cheered as they bounced from one glowing platform to another, while elderly couples floated with practiced elegance. Ethan immediately lost his balance. "I've got it," he announced confidently. He did not have it. He drifted sideways toward a decorative crystal pillar before the woman caught his hand and gently pulled him back. Their momentum carried them into a slow spin that somehow transformed the near disaster into part of the dance. "You planned that," she teased. "I absolutely did." "You look terrified." "I can multitask," she smiled. "You are either very brave or very convincing." "I've been told neither by professionals." Around them, holographic birds formed enormous circles across the sky, their wings scattering shimmering particles that resembled tiny galaxies. Alien musicians played instruments that bent sound into visible waves, allowing every melody to bloom like flowers above the crowd. The woman watched the lights with quiet admiration. "I come here every cycle," she said softly. "You do?" "When I can." "You travel alone?" "Usually." "Aren't your friends worried?" A faint, almost wistful expression crossed her face. "My friends rarely allow me to disappear." "So tonight is special?" She nodded. "For a few hours, no one expects anything from me." Ethan noticed the subtle change in her voice. The cheerful confidence remained, but beneath it rested a quiet exhaustion that didn't belong at a celebration. "So," he said, deliberately changing the mood, "if we're escaping responsibilities, I should confess something." She looked curious. "I'm supposed to be attending an engineering conference tomorrow, and instead you're dancing. I've made what scholars call an excellent decision." She laughed again. "I approve." A nearby vendor rolled past on a hovering cart filled with glowing drinks. "Star Nectar," the vendor announced dramatically. "Guaranteed to improve your dancing by 42%. Ethan frowned. 42? "The remaining 58% depends entirely on talent." The woman grinned. "I think you may require 2 glasses." "I was hoping confidence counted as talent." "It counts as entertainment." They each accepted a drink. The liquid shimmered blue before changing to gold the instant they touched it. "What determines the color?" Ethan asked. "The drink analyzes emotional patterns." He looked into his golden glass. "And gold means?" The woman glanced at it before answering. "It means you're happier than you expected to be." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The music slowed again, quieter now, carrying them beneath floating lanterns that reflected in her bright eyes. Ethan still didn't know her name. She hadn't asked his occupation beyond human engineer. They were simply 2 strangers sharing an evening that somehow felt untouched by the endless noise of the galaxy. Neither of them noticed the distant figures standing atop a nearby observation tower. Their dark uniforms blended into the shadows, while advanced optical devices remained fixed on the woman. One officer quietly activated a communicator. "Our target has been located." Another answered immediately. "Maintain distance. Should we intervene?" A long silence followed. Finally, the reply came. "Negative. Her Majesty appears happy." The officers lowered their weapons but never looked away as the mysterious woman smiled at Ethan and extended her hand once more. "One more dance?" she asked. Ethan smiled without hesitation. "I was hoping you'd ask." The festival seemed determined to prove that time itself could dance. Hours slipped by without Ethan noticing. One performance blended into another as the sky slowly darkened, revealing stars that pulsed with colors no human eye had evolved to understand. Floating observatories projected ancient constellations across the heavens, while thousands of luminous drones arranged themselves into enormous mythical creatures that raced between the moons. Ethan and the mysterious woman wandered away from the crowded plaza toward quieter streets where crystal trees swayed despite the absence of wind. Their leaves glowed with soft blue light, and every few moments one drifted free, transforming into a tiny mechanical butterfly before fluttering away. "I've never seen trees manufacture butterflies," Ethan admitted. "They don't." He looked confused. "They manufacture maintenance drones." One butterfly landed on his shoulder and immediately scanned his jacket. A pleasant electronic voice announced, "Your left sleeve contains 32% more dust than festival standards permit." Ethan stared at it. "I miss when butterflies were judgmental in silence." The woman laughed. The little drone politely vacuumed his sleeve before saluting and flying away. "Efficient," Ethan muttered. "Very. Terrifying." They continued walking until they reached a quiet bridge suspended above a river of liquid light. Instead of water, millions of microscopic energy organisms flowed beneath them, glowing brighter whenever someone nearby experienced joy. The river shimmered like a living galaxy. "It's beautiful," Ethan whispered. "It remembers." He looked at her. "The organisms store emotional echoes," she explained. "Scientists say happy memories make them shine longer." "So this river is filled with celebrations? And reunions, weddings, births, homecomings." Ethan leaned against the railing. "I wish Earth had something like this." "It does." He frowned. "It just remembers differently." For a few peaceful minutes, neither of them spoke. Around them, the sounds of the festival softened into distant music carried by the evening breeze. Then a loud crash echoed nearby. A spherical delivery robot rolled straight into a decorative fountain before bouncing backward. "Route recalculation," it declared confidently. It immediately drove into the fountain again. Ethan blinked. "That machine has my sense of direction. The city updates its maps every 6 hours. Does the robot know that?" "It refuses." The delivery robot reversed, spun in 3 complete circles, and proudly announced, "Obstacle successfully identified." It identified the fountain after hitting it twice, Ethan observed. "Remarkable progress." Even the robot emitted what sounded suspiciously like an embarrassed beep before escaping down another street. Their laughter lingered after it disappeared. "You smile more than most visitors," the woman said. "My job involves repairing cargo engines." "And they only explode on the interesting days." She raised an eyebrow. "How many interesting days have you had?" "Legally?" She laughed so hard she had to steady herself against the bridge. "I like you, Ethan." He froze. "You remembered my name." "I remembered it the first time." "And you still chose to spend the evening with me?" "I've been asking myself the same question." He pretended to look offended. "I'll recover eventually. You seem resilient." "I once survived a 17-hour lecture from a propulsion professor." "That sounds worse than space pirates." "It was." The comfortable silence returned. At last, Ethan looked toward her. "I've answered plenty of questions tonight." "You have. But I still don't know your name." She became unusually quiet. For the first time that evening, she looked away instead of meeting his eyes. "My name," she began softly, "is complicated. Complicated names are allowed. It isn't the pronunciation." "What is it then?" "If I tell you, this evening may end." Ethan studied her expression. There was no fear there, only reluctance. "Then don't tell me." She looked surprised. "You don't mind?" "I've enjoyed tonight without knowing it." She smiled with genuine relief. "Thank you." Above them, a shooting star crossed the sky. Except it wasn't a star. Dozens of silent black spacecraft emerged from hyperspace beyond the atmosphere, their hulls nearly invisible against the darkness. They maintained extraordinary distance from the festival, hidden from ordinary visitors by sophisticated cloaking fields. Inside the lead vessel, a silver-haired commander watched the bridge through a magnified holographic display. "Status? No immediate threats. The Queen remains with the human." The commander folded his hands. "How many times has she smiled tonight?" A junior officer checked the recordings. 74. The bridge fell silent. Finally, the commander sighed. "That is more than the last 3 official galas combined." He looked once more at the 2 tiny figures standing peacefully above the glowing river. "Maintain observation. No intervention?" "Not yet." Far below, completely unaware that an entire royal security fleet was quietly protecting the evening from the shadows, Ethan smiled at the mysterious woman. "So?" She looked back at him. "Would you like to see where the festival hides its best midnight music?" Her eyes brightened. "I was hoping you'd ask first." The streets gradually emptied as midnight settled over Lysura, yet the festival refused to sleep. Instead, it became quieter, more intimate, as if the entire planet had lowered its voice. The great celebrations remained in the distance, while hidden corners awakened with smaller performances, meant for those willing to wander. The mysterious woman guided Ethan through a narrow passage carved into a hillside of luminous crystal. The walls shimmered with veins of liquid light that pulsed gently whenever someone laughed nearby. "So this is where the best music hides?" Ethan asked. She smiled. "The best music never competes with loud crowds." The passage opened into a circular courtyard surrounded by ancient metallic trees. Their silver branches stretched toward the stars, each leaf acting as a tiny instrument. A soft breeze drifted through them, creating melodies that no orchestra could have reproduced. There were barely 20 people there. No stage, no audience, only musicians sitting together in a circle, while strange alien instruments floated around them, playing alongside their owners. Ethan stopped walking. "I don't think tourists are supposed to know this place. They usually don't. And yet here I am. You have an unusual talent." "For what?" "For getting lost in the correct direction. I've been told that before." "I doubt it." "You'd be surprised." One of the musicians noticed them and nodded warmly. Without exchanging a single word, he tossed Ethan a small metallic sphere. Ethan caught it awkwardly. "What do I do with this?" The woman folded her arms. "I honestly don't know." "That is not encouraging." He pressed what appeared to be a button. Instantly, the sphere unfolded into a tiny hovering instrument with 6 glowing strings. The instrument looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at the instrument. Then it emitted an impatient beep. "I think," Ethan said carefully, "it expects me to play." The instrument beeped again, louder. "I don't even play guitar." The translator on his wrist interrupted. "It says your lack of qualifications has been noted. Whose side are you on?" "The funniest one." Ethan carefully brushed one glowing string. Instead of a musical note, the instrument projected a perfect recording of a goat. The entire courtyard fell silent. Another string produced the sound of a ship's emergency alarm. A third released the unmistakable sneeze of a gigantic alien creature. The musicians burst into laughter. Even the floating instrument seemed pleased with itself. "I've invented a new musical genre," Ethan declared proudly. The woman laughed until tears gathered in the corners of her bright blue eyes. "I believe you've accidentally insulted 3 civilizations." "Only 3? I'm improving." One elderly musician floated closer. "You play—" He searched for the proper word. "Fearlessly." "I also play terribly." Those qualities often arrive together. The old musician adjusted the instrument with a few graceful movements before handing it back. This time, Ethan touched a string. A warm, gentle melody echoed through the courtyard. His eyebrows rose. "I definitely didn't do that." "The instrument corrected your mistakes. I wish my engineering exams had worked that way." The mysterious woman quietly joined the circle of musicians. When she began singing, conversation throughout the courtyard faded away. Her voice wasn't powerful. It didn't need to be. It carried a quiet sincerity that blended perfectly with the silver trees, the glowing stars, and the gentle breeze. Ethan found himself listening less to the words and more to the peace they carried. She wasn't performing. She was simply happy. For the first time all evening, Ethan realized that despite her elegance, despite the confidence she carried so naturally, there was something almost lonely about her happiness, as though evenings like this were incredibly rare. When the final note faded, the musicians respectfully bowed their heads toward her. Not dramatically, not ceremonially, simply with quiet affection. She returned the gesture just as naturally. Ethan noticed. "You're popular," he whispered as they stepped away. "They're old friends. You visit them often?" "Whenever life allows." "And does life allow it very often?" She looked toward the stars before answering. "Not as often as I'd like." Before Ethan could ask another question, the ground beneath them trembled almost imperceptibly. No one else seemed alarmed. Far above the atmosphere, however, dozens of cloaked warships shifted formation. Inside the flagship, warning symbols flashed across tactical displays. "Unidentified vessels entering the outer system." an officer reported. Hostile. Unknown. The commander studied the tactical map. Do not alarm Her Majesty. Another officer hesitated. And the human? The commander looked once more at the smiling pair walking beneath the silver trees. For tonight, let them believe the galaxy is at peace. When they left the courtyard of silver trees, the festival had entered its final hours. The great crowds had thinned, replaced by small groups wandering beneath lanterns that drifted lazily through the night like tiny moons. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks bloomed without making a sound, filling the sky with enormous flowers of blue and emerald light. I've never attended a celebration this quiet, Ethan said. The woman smiled. That means you're finally seeing the real festival. I thought the real festival involved me being attacked by floating ice cream. That was merely your initiation. I'm concerned there are levels. There are. I knew it. She laughed as they crossed another bridge suspended high above the city. Beneath them, sleek magnetic trains glided silently through transparent tunnels, while streams of airborne vehicles flowed between crystal towers. Everything moved with effortless precision, like a civilization that had mastered technology centuries ago and no longer needed to show off. What happens when the festival ends? Ethan asked. Everyone goes back to being who they were before. And you? Her answer came after a long pause. I try. The words lingered between them. Ethan noticed how naturally she had smiled all evening, yet every mention of tomorrow seemed to dim that light for just a heartbeat. So, he said gently, what would you do if nobody expected anything from you? She looked toward the stars. I would travel. Anywhere specific? Everywhere. He nodded. I've got a list like that. You do? It keeps getting longer because I never stop adding places. She smiled again. I like impossible lists. They're more optimistic. As they continued walking, they reached a quiet observation platform overlooking nearly the entire city. Transparent energy barriers protected visitors, while leaving the view untouched. Thousands of floating lights reflected from the lakes below, making Lysura appear as though it had been built inside the night sky itself. At the center of the platform stood a curious machine shaped like a polished silver arch. A sign beside it read, Galactic Compatibility Scanner. Find your perfect dance partner. Accuracy, 97.4%. The small print underneath added, Accuracy decreases dramatically after desserts. Ethan grinned. I don't trust anything that blames desserts. The woman folded her arms. We should try it. You trust strange festival machines? I trust entertainment. That sounds dangerous. It usually is. Before Ethan could object, she gently pushed him beneath the arch. Blue light swept over him from head to toe. The machine hummed thoughtfully, then it announced in an overly cheerful voice, Subject appears emotionally stable. Ethan smiled proudly. A second later it added, Relative to human averages. He sighed. I knew there'd be a catch. Now it was her turn. She stepped beneath the scanner. Golden light circled around her before stopping completely. The machine remained silent. 1 second. 2, 5. Then alarms began flashing. The arch projected dozens of glowing symbols into the air. Processing. Administrative override detected. Ethan frowned. I think we broke it. The machine suddenly reset itself. A calm mechanical voice replaced the previous cheerful one. Access denied. No compatibility analysis available. Highest level security classification detected. Please enjoy the remainder of your evening. The display instantly shut down. Ethan stared at the dark screen. That seems unnecessarily dramatic. She quickly stepped away, trying very hard not to look nervous. Perhaps it's malfunctioning. Convenient malfunction. It is a very old machine. It looked brand new. It has aged gracefully. He raised an eyebrow, but chose not to press further. Instead, he laughed. I'll tell people the computer was intimidated. I think that explanation is surprisingly believable. Hidden nearly a kilometer away, 2 Royal Intelligence officers watched through long-range optics. The scanner almost identified Her Majesty. It was disconnected in time, barely. Erased the system logs. Already done. Back on the platform, Ethan leaned against the railing. She looked at him. I still don't know what you do. I have many responsibilities. That sounds suspiciously like someone avoiding the question. She laughed quietly. Perhaps. I'll make you a deal. What kind? When you're finally ready to tell me, he smiled warmly. I'll listen. For several seconds, she simply looked at him. No calculation, No caution, only gratitude. Far beyond the peaceful city, the unidentified fleet that had entered the system altered its course once again. This time, it was heading directly toward Lysura. The first hint that dawn was approaching came not from the sky, but from the stars themselves. One after another, thousands of artificial constellations that had illuminated Lysura throughout the festival slowly dimmed, allowing the real stars to reclaim the heavens. The city became quieter, gentler, as if the entire planet were taking a deep breath before turning to ardor and ordinary. Ethan and the mysterious woman wandered toward the highest terrace overlooking the capital. The cool morning air carried the scent of glowing flowers that opened only during the final hour of the festival. Tiny maintenance drones floated among them, collecting stray decorations while politely thanking visitors for participating in statistically significant happiness. "I love optimistic robots," Ethan said. "They're programmed that way. They're still more cheerful than my landlord." She smiled. "Your landlord sounds unfortunate. He once raised my rent because he said my apartment had excellent gravity." She blinked. "That's not a valid reason." "I told him that." "What did he say?" "Exactly," he replied. She laughed so hard she had to stop walking. "I believe humans survive through humor. We have to." A comfortable silence settled between them again. Ahead stood a circular platform surrounded by transparent crystal pillars. As the first rays of sunlight touched them, each pillar projected shimmering memories gathered throughout the festival. Hundreds of joyful moments floated through the air as holographic echoes, children chasing miniature comets, friends embracing after years apart, families dancing, musicians laughing, couples spinning beneath the stars. Then Ethan froze. One crystal projected the two of them dancing together. Another showed them laughing while chasing the floating ice cream. A third captured the moment on the bridge, where they had stood watching the river of living light. "I didn't know the festival recorded memories," Ethan murmured. "It only keeps the happiest ones." So somewhere in this city, our evening became part of its history. Neither of them looked away from the floating images. The woman's smile was gentle now, touched by something bittersweet. "I'll miss this," she whispered. Ethan turned toward her. "You come every cycle." "I do. But eventually morning always arrives." Before Ethan could ask what she meant, a sharp chime echoed through the terrace. Not loud, not threatening, simply precise. The woman closed her eyes. "They've found me." Ethan frowned. "Who's found you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the eastern horizon. From beyond the distant mountains, dozens of sleek, silver craft emerged from the clouds in perfect formation. They moved without noise, their polished hulls reflecting the sunrise like mirrors. Behind them followed larger warships, elegant rather than intimidating, escorted by disciplined wings of interceptor craft. Visitors throughout the city stopped walking. Many simply stared upward. Ethan whistled softly. "That's a serious welcoming committee." The woman's expression softened with quiet resignation. "It usually is." High above, the flagship descended until it hovered motionless beyond the terrace. A beam of pale blue light reached toward the ground. Within seconds, rows of armored soldiers emerged from transport platforms. Their armor shimmered with silver energy lines, and each warrior carried ceremonial weapons rather than combat rifles. None of them looked at Ethan. Every one of them looked only at the woman. They stopped several meters away. Then, as one, hundreds of soldiers knelt. The movement was so perfectly synchronized that even the mechanical birds circling overhead fell silent. Ethan slowly looked from the soldiers to the woman standing beside him. "I have the feeling you're about to tell me what you do for a living." She let out a small laugh despite everything. "I suppose I can no longer postpone the conversation." The commander of the guard removed his helmet and bowed deeply. "Your Majesty," he said respectfully, "the Royal Council requests your immediate return. The emergency session cannot be delayed any longer." Ethan felt every word settle into place. "Your Majesty, not ambassador, not governor, not minister, Queen." The woman turned toward him. For the first time since they had met, there was no playful mystery in her eyes, only honesty. "My name," she said softly, "is Elyria." She took one slow breath. "I am the queen of the Asterian Empire." Ethan stared at her for several long seconds. Then he nodded thoughtfully. "I knew you were hiding something." She looked almost nervous. "You did? I just didn't expect it to be an entire empire." To everyone's surprise, including the commander still kneeling, Queen Elyria burst into laughter. For one precious moment, before duty reclaimed the morning, she wasn't a queen. She was simply the woman Ethan had danced with all night. Morning sunlight spread across Lysura as the festival quietly disappeared behind the routines of another day. The floating lanterns descended one by one, becoming ordinary lights again, while the crystal streets returned to carrying travelers instead of dancers. It was as though the galaxy itself had closed a beautiful book. Queen Elyria stood before her waiting guards, yet her eyes remained on Ethan. "I owe you an apology," she said softly. "For being a queen, for not telling you." Ethan smiled. "You told me when you were ready. I wanted one evening where no one looked at a crown before looking at me. I never saw the crown. You do now. I see the same woman who laughed because I lost a fight with floating ice cream." For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then Elyria smiled, brighter than the sunrise itself. "You really are impossible." "So, I've been informed." The commander respectfully stepped forward. "Your Majesty, the Council has confirmed the unidentified fleet." The humor faded for only a moment. "They crossed the border?" Elyria asked. "They turned away." "Turned away. Our patrols identified themselves." The opposing commander transmitted a single message. "What did it say?" The commander almost smiled. "We have no interest in disturbing the Queen's festival." Even Ethan blinked. "They left?" The commander nodded. "It appears your reputation reached them before our weapons did." Elyria released a quiet breath. "Then today begins with peace." The soldiers around her visibly relaxed. Ethan looked toward the enormous fleet waiting above the city. "I have to admit," she looked at him, "your commute is slightly more impressive than mine." She laughed. "I rarely enjoy it. I'd still be late." "You absolutely would. I'd spend 20 minutes looking for docking gate 7. There are only 6. Exactly." Even several royal guards struggled to hide their smiles. The commander discreetly looked away. Elyria turned back toward Ethan. "I never properly thanked you." "You don't need to." "I do. You gave me the best night I've ever had." She lowered her eyes briefly. "You gave me something rarer." "And what's that?" "A night where I forgot I was queen." The words settled quietly between them. For the first time in years, the guards understood why she had disappeared without ceremony. She had not abandoned her duties. She had remembered herself. Elyria reached into the pocket of her traveling cloak and removed a small silver token no larger than a coin. Tiny stars shimmered beneath its transparent surface. "This is a royal passage seal." Ethan accepted it carefully. "What does it do?" "It opens every gate in my empire." He stared at the tiny object. "That seems like a terrible thing to hand someone who still gets lost chasing dessert." "I've considered the risks, and I've decided they're entertaining." He laughed. "I promise not to invade. I appreciate your restraint." She stepped back toward the waiting transport beam. Duty was calling once again, yet this time it no longer looked like a prison, because she now knew there was a place in the galaxy where someone expected nothing from her except another dance. Before entering the beam, she turned once more. "The next Starfire Festival begins in 1 year." Ethan nodded. "I'll be here. You might have engineering conferences. I'll survive the paperwork." She smiled knowingly. "I believe you will." The blue light surrounded her. Within seconds, she stood aboard the flagship. The royal fleet slowly ascended toward orbit, disappearing into hyperspace one brilliant ship after another, until only silence remained above Lysura. Ethan stayed on the terrace long after they had gone. His sarcastic translator finally spoke. "You appear emotionally compromised." "I am. Would you like a motivational quote?" "Do I have a choice?" "No." The bracelet cleared its artificial throat. "Sometimes the longest journeys begin with terrible dancing." Ethan laughed. "You just made that up." "I improved through experience." He looked at the small silver seal resting in his hand before slipping it safely into his pocket. A year ago, he would have returned home believing the universe was simply larger than Earth. Now he understood something far more important. No matter how vast the galaxy became, genuine kindness could cross every border more easily than any starship. 1 year later, beneath the first lantern of the next Starfire Festival, a queen arrived without fear. A human arrived without hesitation, and before either of them spoke a single word, they both smiled. Neither had forgotten the promise. This time, there would be no disguises, only the next dance.